Thanks for tuning in to another podcast interview here about adventure education topics for us all. I'm Curt Davidson, an assistant professor at California State University, Long Beach, and president of Alpenglow Education. And with me today, I have Tom Smith. I'll let Tom introduce himself here.
Hello, I'm the executive director and professor at Summit Adventure, and glad to be here today.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So today Tom and I are going to talk about facilitation and adventure education and all the important aspects of that and kind of what that is and what that means. So Tom, I wonder if you could start us off with telling us a little bit about, how you define facilitation and adventure programming and experiential ed in general.
Yeah, I think it was helpful years ago to look at what facilitation is out of Webster's, and basically that word means to make easier. So in the context of adventure education, I think that people come out in general to have some sort of experience that may affect their life for the short term or the long term. And so if my role as a facilitator, then my job is to make easier their ability to transfer something that they went through, whether it was a climb or a paddle or a ski or just even a hike, to turn that back into something that has meaning past the actual event that they did.
Okay, so you focus on that transference piece. I hear you say, so when you're doing this, what do you hope that the students specifically are getting out of the facilitation process?
I think for me, I'm trying to get each student, and there might be, let's say there's 10 of them in a patrol or in a group or maybe 30 in a college classroom or whatever it is. My goal is to see if I can ask a question or probe a little bit so that the student is thinking a little bit deeper about what sort of impact an experience can be for them. So that's it's sort of individualized for me. I'm not just throwing out one question that I think is going to bowl every single person over, and because I just haven't found that to be true. So I'm sort of working even though I'm in a group setting as a facilitator or professor or whatever, I'm still looking at it as like a one-on-one with each participant.
Yeah, cool. Now, I know you do a fair bit of work with fathers and sons. Do you have a particular example that you could share, maybe a story from working with that population about facilitation?
Yeah, one comes to mind. There was a father-son team. The son was 16 years old, and let's just say his name was Frank. It's my pet name these days for examples. And so Frank, although I don't think there's really any 16-year-olds in the United States that are named Frank, but let's just say that there was. And so Frank was obviously having a difficult relationship with his father, and his father described it as, I can't get Frank to open up and share anything. So 2 days later, I met him up on top of a rappel, and they were getting ready to do all the things that needed to do to rappel. And so I asked Frank if he was excited about rappelling with his father. And he opened his mouth, and he got like 3 words into a sentence, and his father cut him off and finished the thought for him. Then I asked Frank, looking directly at Frank, I asked him if I can't remember, another couple of questions, and each time his dad cut him off, right? Interrupted him, finished the sentence. So I took it upon myself to pull. I pulled the dad off to the side, and I said, "Hey, I don't really know you, but I just want to make an observation that initially 2 days ago you said that your son doesn't talk to you, and now I'm up here, and I just asked him 3 or 4 questions that were directed at him, obviously, and you cut him off and finished sentences for him." And that was all I really had to do, was to make an observation in that scenario. And that father almost was like I slapped him. He got wide-eyed and his mouth dropped open, and he said, "My gosh, no wonder he doesn't talk to me." And so, it was sort of a specific type of facilitation where all I thought I really had to do was make an observation. I mean, I could have said something like, "Hey, Dad, you're really a moron," or I could have made a judgment about his fathering skills or whatever. But I didn't really have to in that scenario. I just had to make an observation, and the dad took it from there. So that's one story that I think of often, that making observations is a big part of this facilitation piece.
Yeah. I so I hear you keeps bringing up the word observation, and that's one of the things you and I've worked together a fair bit over the years. I've admired about this technique that you've developed. Use sort of shifting away from the magic bullet of this perfect question to make people think about what they've learned, to using this observational technique. Could you tell us a little bit about how that works?
I've already spoke a little bit about the one question idea, and I get a lot of sort of college graduate new instructors that come out, and somehow I know this isn't in your program at Long Beach State, because you would never do this, but in facilitation classes that these kids that get adventure education degrees, they have this idea that there's this incredible bomb question that's going to blow everyone off onto their backs, and it appears to be incredibly stressful to be working with the group and try to think what that question would be, and it's stressful because you got 12 people, or I don't know, even 5 people that are all different, and so there's not one magic formula, one magic question. So instead, it seems like if I'm interested in what's really going on with folks, I should sort of observe and recall back for them things that they said, because quotes and close paraphrases are actually observations. So in other words, if I just repeat something you just said, that's an observation. So you can't deny it. If I say that you're a horrible professor and you're sub-quality teaching, well, you could deny that all day long, or you could get aggravated by it or defensive or whatever, because typically when people are critiqued or criticized, we get defensive. But observations are things you hear or see, and in this case anyway, I guess you can make too many observations about what you smell or taste, but it's all in that whole quantitative realm, and so it's difficult to get irritated if I just parrot back to you something you just said, and or something that you could see. So in the case of the father, like I said, it was relatively easy to make an observation, and I think the idea for facilitators, especially younger facilitators who don't exactly know, the big picture of what they're trying to do, I try to get them out when they're at Summit or when I'm teaching to just think about making observations, because from there a lot of things can fall into place, and the participants themselves actually make the facilitation. Remember, for me, the facilitation is to make easier. So if I make an observation that they're a little bit blinded by, well, then they can do like the dad did and figure out that they got to change around some of their fathering techniques.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, so you touched on this a little bit, and I think it's interesting. This is a tangible skill for new facilitators that they can kind of put in their pocket and utilize. But I'm wondering if you have any other advice. A lot of people that'll be watching this are college students, people going into the field. What advice would you have for somebody that wants to be a really skilled facilitator?
Well, I think one piece is the observation part, right? The other that comes after the don't try to find the 100% bomb-proof question, and then I think more often than not, people will, if you ask them a question, even if you're trying to go one-on-one or you're making an observation, I think it seems like you have to push people a little bit, right? Most of us, myself included, will give a relatively superficial answer unless we get pushed a little bit. So it's sort of the rare individual, let's say in a group of 12 or in a class that you're teaching, where you're going to ask a question, even if you ask it and it's personalized towards Frank or Jimmy or Harriet or whatever, they might still say something akin to good. It was a good experience, right? Which is almost meaningless. So I would just say that if as a new facilitator, expect the superficial answer, and then that means you've got to be able to come up with a follow-up thing. So, in that scenario, somebody says, how was the rappel? That was good. Well, can you define good for me? Right? What does that really mean? So just one more question may sort of unlock that person's a little bit more depth than what they're going to give you just on their own. Because I think in general, I don't know what you think, Curt, but I think in general our society is pretty superficial, and so it is sort of good enough to just say good, or that movie was good, or that sucked, or just sort of one word answers that don't really say a whole lot.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I think about that, like when I ask someone how their day is, and they say good, and that's, I don't know for me if it's like just a courtesy thing that I feel like I need to do, but yeah, I don't really follow up. So yeah, I think those follow up questions probably drive it home. But I think that also speaks to just caring as an individual. You're getting paid to deliver this experience, so those caring enough to ask those follow-up questions and actually hear a real answer, like you say, I think can go a long way too.
Well, it seems like we generally, well, you probably get paid quite a bit more than me because you're a high-end professor at a state university. But let's say that you were running a nonprofit. So most of us aren't in it for the pay, and so the rewards of hearing people express deeper things besides good. I mean, maybe if it's your first time rappelling a group off a cliff or paddling them down a river or whatever, maybe just hearing good the whole time and realizing that they're all safe, nobody died. Maybe in an introductory year for you, that would be enough. But, after a year or two, I would think most people are looking for something deeper that's an affirmation of the meaning for the job.
Yeah, right. Yeah, a little self-validation there for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how about just to conclude, maybe we could zoom out a little bit and could you speak to what you see as the role and the importance of facilitation within the adventure education context in general? How important is it to these courses and experiences?
Well, I think it's let's see. I was gonna say crucial, and then I was gonna maybe bump it up whatever notch is more than crucial, right? So it might involve everything from a skilled facilitator would preemptively keep people safe. So in other words, I'd rather make sure that nobody broke their leg. Although it is good that I know how to repair a broken leg, or fix a broken leg and get them out of the field. It's way better to not have anyone have a broken leg. So there's something about having a vision for safety, because I think you did the last study that confirmed that 87% of all people that get hurt out in the field don't really have that much fun. So I mean, you're the quantitative guru in adventure education, the leader, the actual leader in that
breaking research there.
Yeah. So I think people need to be safe. So that's one thing. And then above and beyond, I think that there are, according to educators, there's probably two kinds of people out there. One person that at age 12 started to make abstract thinking, right? That's a Piaget sort of a thing. And so from age 12 on, they can make abstractions about different things. And so it may not take that much effort to get them to realize that backing off a 150-foot cliff or going through some whitewater or even just doing a challenging backpacking trip is something that they can bring back to their life and it can make some meaning. It's not just that. Although, a backpacking trip in and of itself brings peace and beauty and all kinds of great things, and then and they can abstract that to other parts of their life. Then, according to Piaget, then there's other people at age 12, they're still concrete sequential thinkers, and they never make that move. So you've got that sort of person who, if at the end of a climb or an experience, you ask them, what did they learn? They say, I learned how to tie a bowline. Okay. Well, there's probably not a lot of job satisfaction for that. Maybe if you're a mountain guide and somebody says, we got to the top of a peak and we got back down again, that would be great. And there's nothing wrong with that. But for a facilitator, trying to get them to realize you got to the top of a peak that was challenging, and then how does that relate to different parts of your life? That takes, for a lot of people, whether it's the concrete sequential folks or folks that are so busy they can't really think that through, even if they're abstract thinkers, it takes somebody sort of pressing them a little bit with a $64,000 question that is, to me, the reason why people like you and I keep doing this stuff year after year. And that's hearing somebody say, wow, this could be a transformative moment in my life, because I was always too afraid to speak up about my emotions, or for the dad, right? I'm going to let my kid talk and we're going to have a much better relationship. I mean, that's all golden. So that wasn't going to happen. That dad wasn't going to make that discovery on his own, despite the fact that you'd think somebody would have said, hey, can you just let me finish my sentence, right? So the 16-year-old doesn't know how to do that, and the dad doesn't know how to do it. So they're just stuck. And so I could have used that with my father, so I didn't have a facilitator. So maybe that's what keeps me doing this stuff, is thinking that people need that extra oomph of somebody watching and making difficult learnings and discoveries easier.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, any other things we should talk about? I don't know.
I think I'm maybe for you. I'm interested in how you have adapted from being pretty much a full-time field person to now professor. Because there's, do you still think that you're a facilitator, and how has it changed from being like a wilderness instructor?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. For me, it's changed in that I want my students to get different things out of different experiences. So I mentioned earlier I'm a faculty here in Long Beach, and as soon as I got here, I realized, unlike previous populations that I've worked with, is folks have a significant disconnect with the natural environment, because we're surrounded by urban landscape for hours as you drive out of here.
Yeah.
And so, like, for example, I'll facilitate when I go and have these discussions and facilitate things. I'm shifting sometimes I shift away from personal growth and development, like we would typically see in adventure education, to things like connection to the natural environment and awareness of environmental issues and impacts. One of my favorite things is we do a kayaking trip on the Colorado River. And in the class, I always ask the students, when you turn that spigot on at home, where does that water come from? And I've had very few, if any, students get the answer right to that question. And so when you're kayaking on the river where your drinking water comes from, and you drove 4 hours, 5 hours to get there, that really rings through for people, that they start to understand, wow, we live in a desert, and we rely on these man-made structures to bring us basic needs like water, and that's a fragile thing with earthquakes that are down here. And so, yeah, facilitating conversations around that, and then giving people solutions as well, of here's some things you can do, simple things like shutting the water off when you're brushing your teeth, can help with some of these societal problems too, that I think as a facilitator, it's our obligation and our opportunity to help with that. So, yeah.
Well, I think it's sort of interesting that you picked up on the environmental part, because that, even though maybe it doesn't sound as personalized as, okay, I repelled, I overcame some part of my fear of heights, or whatever it is, still seems to me that that's a pretty deep channel for learning and growth, is to even figure out how would I be a more responsible citizen, and caretaker of the earth.
Yeah, definitely.
Because you can't, I mean, clearly from the college classes that I teach and have taught, I mean, it's not always about some emotional growth. It's sometimes just recognizing just bigger parts of what's going on besides your own life.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Just creating that awareness.
Well, how about you? How about what's your best example of facilitation? So you've been a professor now for 2 years, right? Just your second or third?
Three. Yeah.
Okay, I must be circling the drain just a little bit too heavily here. But let's just say that I'm going to stay long enough for this question. So you've been for 3 years now. Do you have an example of like a highlight, whether it was sort of an environmental piece of facilitation, or sort of an aha in a classroom setting that you had?
So we have a class here at Cal State Long Beach called Desert Expeditions, where we do a 4 or 5 day backpacking trip in Death Valley. And I remember, that it's sort of classic and a little bit cliche around the facilitation stories, but we got the students out of the trip there with the last day. We're at the campsite, getting ready to head home, and we were doing our conclusion debrief where we were trying to have one final facilitated discussion about creating meaning from that experience and then transferring it back home, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
And it's the classic, I never thought when I showed up 5 days ago that I could put everything I needed in my backpack and carry it with me for 5 days and sustain myself out there for 5 days. And I think what that student was really talking about was this idea of resiliency and grit. And especially now, with the pandemic going on, and there's a lot of uncertainty around food and water and just people's basic needs. How important is that our programs
Yeah.
instill that in people, and what an opportunity that we have to facilitate that learning for people, um, especially in times like this. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I have a feeling that student is not out buying 425,000 rolls of toilet paper. He probably has a little bit more sense that I can make it through this without going hysterical.
Right. I hope so.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think the work that's happening at Long Beach is that you do there, and the adventure ed programs in colleges are crucial because typically students, they get a fair chunk of head knowledge from the academic side, and then they go into student life, and they've got dorms and whatever else. But I don't know that they get that intermediate stuff that is facilitated learning on how you can deal with conflict or how you can be a better citizen in the world or whatever. It's sort of this middle road somewhere that it'd be nice if every college had that. And but so I'm glad for the work that you do at Long Beach State. I think it's awesome. Uphill battle though, for sure.
Yeah, and likewise there at Summit Adventure with your semester program and summer courses going. So yeah. Keep up the good work.
Yep, you too.
All right. Well, I'd love to get you back on here sometime to give us more specifics about your particular style and technique, because I think it's a really valuable tool for new facilitators and and people that have been doing it a long time, but it's a really tangible way to teach facilitation. So hopefully we'll get you back on here and you can teach us that sometime.
All right, sweet. I'm ready and willing right now with the virus going on. There's not a lot of other things going on. So
yeah,
just let me know.
All right.
All right, thanks, Curt.
Thank you.